Jasmine, are you there?
Yes,
Cool. How was your weekend?
it was pretty good. How was
Good.
yours?
Good. It was good. Uh, it was cold uh, Friday, and but I was able to get some stuff done anyway. And uh, got my oil changed and lawnmower serviced, and got my lawn mowed, and rode horses this weekend. Got a new horse in to train. It's been busy trying to get ready for a horse show this coming weekend. What about yourself?
We had a movie night at my church
Yeah,
Friday,
what you
and then
watch?
God's Not Dead.
I saw that. Uh, I think I saw it. Is that where the guy goes to college and takes a religion class with the guy that's not doesn't believe in God, or
Yeah,
takes a philosophy class?
yeah,
Yeah, and he has to prove that God's alive or something, or God exists.
yeah. It was a pretty good movie.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Did you work this weekend?
Yeah, I worked yesterday. Saturday I was off. I helped my grandpa. He works the back gate at South Austin Speedway, so I helped him Saturday. It was
Cool.
cold over there.
Really? Saturday was
After it
chilly.
got dark, after it
Yeah,
got
boy, it
dark,
got cold after it got dark, though, didn't it? Uh, well, I'm glad you had a good weekend. You're over your cold. I got your exam graded. You can stand up and take a bow if you want. You did really well.
I haven't looked at my grades yet.
Well, that's just because I just got it graded. Well, even if you had looked at it before class, uh, I just finished grading it before it started recording. But you aced it along with extra credit points. Um, and let's see, what else is there to tell you? I guess that's about it. Uh, the Everything's going well with the class. We've, like I told you the other day, we kind of covered everything that I wanted to cover this semester. But I don't want to shortchange you in any way because you paid good money to take this class. So we're going to continue to learn a little bit more. Uh, the final exam, I do need to talk with Tom. Remind me tomorrow to ask him when y'all's last day of class is so we can put a final due date for this project and uh, presentation. Now, I've been getting some rough drafts in uh, for the projects, and they're the ones I've gotten are looking pretty good. Okay, but I want to talk about some common things that I see. Um, I've gotten pretty good history of the farm, or about your farm, but some things we need to clarify are numbers. How many about how many acres do you have? And I know that can be kind of personal, but I'm not trying to be personal. But if it's your own farm, because it's kind of like asking you how much money. But most of y'all told me how many acres. But let's talk about number of cows you're planning on having, or the number of horses or sheep, uh, or goats. what are your goals for your operation? That's a common one that people are leaving out. Okay. So, you know, if we don't have goals, then we're spinning our wheels because we're not, how are we going to measure or, what are we wanting to achieve? I know our number one thing we want to do is make money. But for your operation, how are you planning on making money? Jasmine here, and I'll pick on Jasmine because that's who I pick on because she's in front of me or on my TV screen. She has said, hey, my goal is to have a terminal cross. All my calves are going to be sold, and I'm going to buy my replacement cows. So I know from the get go that her calves, and she told me her calves are going to be sold at weaning. I left that out. So she's going to, so on her genetics deal, when she's talking about buying bulls or buying semen, I know that she's going to be looking at weaning weights and she's going to be looking at carcass quality. And, you know, and she's going to be looking at some yearling weights too, although that's not going to be her big emphasis because, she's not backgrounded. But it is important for the next guy that gets them because he's going to want them to grow and put on weight so he can make money. And then the feedlot buyer is wanting to have good carcass traits. So I know you're thinking, why does she need to put emphasis on carcass quality? Well, sometimes, or a lot of times, what we have out west are farmers that will buy cattle here in Virginia or just buy cattle and they will feed those cattle out themselves. They may raise corn and soybeans and wheat and but they'll put those cattle on those corn stalks or on wheat on pasture or like they'll harvest that corn and they'll plant grass on there like rye or something and they'll let cattle graze it or if they raise wheat they'll graze that wheat when it comes up, pull the calves off. They come in, graze it again in the spring, and pull them off, let it grow, and then harvest the wheat. And they may not sell all their corn. They may not. They may raise corn, and they may sell some of it. But if it's cheap, but if they can make more money feeding it to cattle, then they're going to feed it to cattle. So some of them are set up for a small feedlot. So these guys come in and they'll buy weaned calves, and they'll take them home or ship them out to their farm, and they'll graze them and they'll feed them and they'll finish them out, and they'll sell them directly to a packer. So that way she's kind of covering all of her bases. Now there's a guy I met when I was in Nebraska, and he was a corn farmer, and he sold part of his corn. Sometimes he would sell it all. It would all depend on the price of cattle and the future prices of cattle and the corn. And sometimes he would just sell it all and not mess with cattle. Sometimes he would keep part of his corn crop and buy calves and feed them out. He'd graze them and feed them and sell them directly to a packer on carcass merit. So by paying attention to weaning, yearling, and carcass traits, if she gets hooked up or if some buyer buys her cattle on a video auction and does that, and he makes money off of them, and she has them, she's had them weaned, she's got them weaned, she's got them all vaccinated, and he takes them, he feeds them out. He doesn't have very much sickness because of her vaccination schedule. They've already been weaned. He doesn't have a lot of problems with them. Who's he going to look at buying cattle from again next year? If he goes to buy cattle, he's going to say, last year I bought them from some lady named Jasmine Vaughn. Let's see if she's got any consigned to these sales. because if she does, I want her calves. And he'd be willing to pay a little bit more extra for it because of her management. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So in the genetics section, you know, I want you to talk about that's going to come back to your goals of what type of bulls you're using. If you're raising your own replacements, and one lady I got in said she's raising her own replacements, so it's going to get a little bit trickier, isn't it? Because she may she may divide her herd up. I don't know. She didn't have her goals wrote down, and I'm not picking on you, uh, but I'm just telling you. She may what she could do is because we need to keep records on all of our cows. They all need to be identified, and we need to keep records. Did they calve? How much did the calf weigh? What sex was it? How much did it wean? It was, when we weaned calves, what did it weigh? The more records that we keep on our animals, and yes, it's a pain in the butt, the better we can make decisions and financial decisions. Uh, so we can pick out those best cows, and we can use bulls on those cows with good maternal traits, or a good all-around bull that has maternal traits and good carcass characteristics. And we can use those cows to raise their replacement heifers from, and the rest of the herd we could breed to the terminal side. Does that make sense? We could do something like that. Typically, in a given year, you're gonna cull. When I say cull, CULL, you're going to get rid of about 10% of your cows on a yearly basis. And the reason being, there's several reasons for this. One, they're not all going to get bred. So, every year uh, we want to preg check our cows and get rid of the ones that's not pregnant. Because if we have a spring calving herd, and when we got everything in for weaning's a good time for preg checking, because everything's up. That's just kind of typical when most producers do. Not all, but most. Uh, we'll cull those cows. We'll sell those cows that are not bred, or they're called open cows. That way we don't have to feed them all year and then find out they don't have a calf in the spring. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you want to preg check your cows every fall. So that needs to be put in there if you have a spring calving herd. Now, if you have a fall calving herd, you know you it and you have plenty of grass, you may not want to. You may not want to cull those cows when you wean those calves, because you may want to put some weight on them, and then with that grass, and then sell them. And the same thing when you cull your cows in the fall. If they're thin, you may want to put them in a separate boundary and feed them a little bit, get some weight on them before you sell them, so you get a little bit more money. And that's just going to be a monetary decision of how much grain is compared to the price of open cows. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So some years, if grain's cheap and coal prices are high, you may want to put some weight on them before you sell them. If grain's very high and cattle prices are cheap, you probably just want to go ahead and sell them. But if they're real skinny, you need to put some weight on them. And if they're in good condition, you may just want to go ahead and sell them and not put any more weight on them. That just kind of boils down to money. But those cull cows, if you're selling 10% of your herd, that's a lot of money coming in. So don't discount that income. That is income. And you need to manage those cull cows so that you can maximize your profits. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this stuff I'm telling you guys, it's just real world stuff. And, it may be Greek to you if you're not familiar with production, cattle production, but it's things you need to think about because that's income and you want to maximize your income. Sometimes people think about maximizing production and, you know, that's good to a point, but there's also an economic theory called the law of diminishing returns. We can keep putting more money into something and keep making better production, but our returns are decreasing. Uh, and if you've had basic economics, you know what I'm talking about because they all cover that law of diminishing returns. So what we need to do as producers, we want to optimize production so that we can maximize our profits. Sometimes getting 10 extra pounds on a calf may not be worth it money wise. It may cost us more than what we're going to get. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, it's all a money deal. As bad as it sounds, we got to make money. We hear a lot about sustainable agriculture. What's sustainable? What's that mean in your mind, Jasmine? What is sustainable agriculture?
Like maintaining it the same. I don't know.
Okay, the same as what? The same as how?
Like the prices and stuff stay average.
Well, prices they fluctuate every year. Costs fluctuate every year. Uh, Typically, I think in today's terms, when we think of the term sustainable agriculture, they're thinking about a holistic management deal to where the farm is, uh, you know, the fertilizes and everything just kind of goes in to that farm, and it can continue on for years. You're not hurting the land. Does that make sense? Whether it be organic
Yes.
or natural beef, organic farming, whatever, or regular farming. And I don't think people think of conventional agriculture as sustainable. Uh, you know, what I think when I think of sustainable agriculture, you know, what I think of is economics. Because first off, if it's not economically viable, are you going to continue to operate? No,
No.
right? So if it's not, so I think economics and making money is going to make it sustainable. And you know, when you think about all these farms, there's a lot of farms out there in this country, even in our state, that are century-old farms. They've been in the family for for 100 years or more. Centennial and bicentennial farms. Some families have been on their farm or ranch since it was homesteaded. I worked for a guy in Blacksburg, and his relatives chased off the Indians on that farm, and he's farming it today. Is that sustainable? You bet his is. His farm was established in the 1700s. That's sustainable in my book. They're making money, and he's still farming it today. So obviously, he's taking care of the land and the water, right? Because it's taking care of him by putting weight on cattle, and feeding his cattle. So I my theory on sustainable agriculture is a little bit different than the current sustainable agriculture people thinking. I'm thinking of making money and staying in business. And I think farmers are our first environmentalists. Yeah, we've made mistakes in the past, Dust Bowl being one of them, but we've learned from them. Because if farmers and ranchers don't take care of their water and their land, they're not going to have a ranch or a farm. It's that simple. The topsoil is going to wash away or blow away, and then there's not going to raise grass or corn or wheat or anything else. So I think when it comes down to it, farmers are your first environmentalists and protecting the environment because that's how they make their living. They're going to protect their land. So back to our cull cows, uh, we want to manage those to where we can maximize our profits, and you can count on getting rid of about 10% of your cows every year. And it's not all those cows that you sell. Say you have 100 cows, so you're going to plan on getting rid of 10 of them every year. It may be if you're doing a good job with nutrition and and everything, they may be pregnant. They may not all be open. You may have three or four. You're always going to have some that doesn't get bred. That's just a fact of life. Whether it's age or something's going on with them hormonally, uh, they're just not going to get bred. So you're always going to have a few of those. But the other ones, it could be production. They're not weaning as heavy calves as the rest of the herd. Does that make sense? Or they may be lame. They may have a bad eye. They may have cancer. Cancer in their eye. They may have a bad udder. You know, uh, and they're not producing milk, or they have what's called a balloon teat, and that's where one of those teats on that udder is really big, and that calf can't get that teat in its mouth to nurse because it's so big. And what you have to do as a manager is get that cow in, and milk down that quarter and get that teat small so that calf can start nursing. So bad udders, bad legs and feet, lameness, being open, uh, a bad eye, cancer eye, pink eye. We don't really worry about, if it's just a scar, it's healed over. Uh, but if it's turned to cancer, we're going to get rid of it. So those things we're going to get rid of because if we keep a lame cow in our herd, and age is another one. You know what? A lot. If you can keep a cow in your herd till she's 10 years old, you're doing well. I know that farm I worked at, when those cows reached 10 years old, we sold them. It didn't matter if they were pregnant. It didn't matter how good of a calf they raised. We sold them when they're 10 years old. And the reason being for us is because our land was really rough. And when they get 10, 11, 12 years old, they'll break down. And you have to put them down or they die. And because you can't sell, because if a cow's really lame, you don't need to sell it. You just need to euthanize her on the farm. Because when you take real lame cattle to the market, it doesn't paint a nice picture uh, for it gives the animal rights people something else to talk about. Whenever you sell cattle, they have to be ambulatory. They have to be able to walk, get up and down and walk. If they can't do that, you can't take them to the market. You need to put them down on the farm. So you do not, you know, and then that's a loss of money. It's a loss of income. So we see a cow that's getting lameness issues, we need to sell her while she's still walking. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's a lot of reasons why we cull cows, and typically you lose about 10% of your herd every year. So you're looking at buying enough cows back to replace those, or keeping enough replacement heifers back to replace those. So if if you're keeping back replacements and you say you generally plan on culling 10% of your herd every year, do you think you need to keep back 10% of your replacement heifers, or do you need to keep back more?
Probably more.
Yeah, generally the rule of thumb is to keep fifth if to keep 5 to 10% more heifers back that you intend, that you plan to sell of your cull cows. So if you're planning to sell 10% or cull out 10% of your herd, you're going to keep back 15 to 20% of your heifers. The reason being is because some of them may not get bred. You may end up throughout the process, of developing them. One of them, some may come up lame, or they may be wild, and you just don't want to deal with that attitude. Uh, you know, there's no need to have crazy cattle, people. I'm just telling you, it makes your life difficult. They can hurt you. Get rid of those idiots. That's another reason you cull cattle. That's another reason the cow may be culled, because she's an idiot. You know, I have the philosophy on my farm. I'm not going to let a cow dictate what type of fence I have to put up. If I have to put up a 6 foot fence to keep one cow in, honey, she's gone. I ain't keeping her. If she's a Grand Prix jumper, she's off my farm. I ain't keeping her. It's too expensive to build that type of fence to keep that one cow. You know what I'm saying? And they're out there.
Yeah.
So call on attitude. You know, man, I tell you, you I can climb a tree pretty fast when a cow's blowing snot down my back. I know that because I've done it before. I've cleared some pretty good fences when a cow's been blowing snot down my back. And all I was trying to do was tag her calf and get a weight on it. Those cows will hurt you. So, you know, we want our cows to be protective of their calves, but we still want to be able to go out there and tag them and not get killed. So those cows get cold. Uh, and, you know, if all your replacement heifers get bred, you have some options for marketing. You can sell them as bred heifers. You can calve them out and sell them as first calf heifers. So, you got some flexibility there. Or if they all got bred, you may decide to sell more of your cow herd back based on production and attitude, because you got enough heifers back to replace them. Make sense?
Yes.
Am I boring you, or is this good information for you? Are you enjoying this?
It's good information.
All right. Am I boring you?
No.
Okay, just checking, because I can swap around here. Because these are things you probably need to put in here about your culling and keeping back replacements or buying cows. Now, the reasons we keep records is so we can figure out what cows we can cull. Ideally, we want to be able to cull our cows based on production, not based on whether or not they're open. So, by keeping records of our weaning weights of our calves, we can figure out, we can take an average of what they weigh and get rid of those cows that are producing calves below our average. Right? and we can keep those high producing cows. Maybe. Or if they're too big calves, we may want to get rid of those cows because they're awful big cows and they're eating a heck of a lot and it's costing us too much money. You know, that depends on your goals. So have clear defined goals so we know what we're looking at. In your genetics section, what I want to see, I don't want you to tell me which bull you're breeding to. I want you to tell me like what bulls, what traits, what EPDs you're going to be looking for in bulls to help you achieve your goals. Uh, so let's talk about numbers, how many cows you're having. Let's talk about your goals. And then in your genetics section, you're going to talk about selecting bulls to reach those goals. Now, one of the students talked about, I don't know where my cows are. We got cows, but I don't know where they're at genetically. So what are we going to do as a production standpoint to figure out what we have? We're not going to get them genetically tested if we don't have a purebred herd. If we got a commercial herd, we're not going to do that. So how can we improve our cow herd if we don't know where we're at? Any ideas, Jasmine?
After you breed them the first time, and if they produce small cows, you could tell their genetics from that.
Well, kind of. You're hitting on the right track. Probably, what I would do, is I would have goals for my operation. Whether it's, a herd that I'm going to keep back my replacements and sell the others, uh, or and improve my genetics through my replacement heifers, or if I have a terminal herd and I'm buying replacement cows. But how do I figure out what I have right now? Well, what I would do, I would individually mark my cows. I would individually identify them with ear tags or brand them with a number so that I know, looking at that cow, that's cow number one. I can see that on her ear tag or I can see it on her brand. And when she calves, I'm going to put cow number one, calved on such and such a date, or cat, and I'd buy me a set of scales and weigh that calf to see how much it weighed. And I would sex the calf. Is it male or female? Weighed so many pounds. And then I would identify that calf so I know that that calf belongs to that cow. At weaning time, get all the weights on my calves, and I'd get my cows preg checked. And my first culling decision is going to be all my open cows are going to be sold. My second culling decision is I'm going to, when these cows calve, I'm going to look at their udders and see if I got any bad udders. Make sure I don't have any plume teats or broken down udders. My second decision is going to be on udders because I don't want to have to get that cow in and milk her 3 or 4 times before that calf's big enough to suck that bloom teat, or her udders broken down and getting cut up and infected all the time. I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to be culling on udders. I'm going to be culling on lameness. If they're lame, I'm going to start, I'm going to get rid of those lame ones. And then I'm going to see, where I'm at. How many cows do I have left? Or how many have I got to cull out? And if I'm at about that 10% mark, I may just quit there. If I'm not, I may call on attitude. Which cows tried to kill me during calving season? I don't want to deal with those. Or which cows can I keep in on my farm? Which ones are always getting out? They're going. Uh, and then I'm going to, and then so I'm going to get rid of my problem cows first, and then I'm eventually going to get to where I'm going to be calling on production as well, because hopefully as I take over the management and my nutrition, and I'm hopefully getting more cows bred, so my main calling decisions aren't going to be based on whether they're open or not. I'm going to be sitting there looking, getting an average winning weight and pick out my outliers and get rid of those. Or, see what my goals are and see which cows are not producing calves to achieve my goals. And it's not going to be done in 1 year. It may take me 5 or 6 years or 7 years to get my cow herd to producing calves where I'm attaining my goals. It's not an overnight process. Uh, so, uh, by individually identifying our cows, we can keep records, and we can use those records on our culling decisions. Um, what else? Any other thing? What else are you? What questions do you have as I'm bringing up this stuff? Because this is all new to you, right?
Right. I can't
Uh,
think of any questions though.
okay, I'm just talking about real life stuff here, guys. You know, one of my students they have a farm, and I don't know how well it's being managed at this point. You know, the rough draft. You know, I can tell they're looking at making some changes and trying to make the herd more profitable, but I don't really know where they're at. Uh, so this lecture's kind of, or so far, been kind of aimed at that student, so they can kind of figure out where they're at, you know, and approaching it from a practical standpoint. Now, let me ask you this: say and this is another real life scenario. A lot of people, and I don't, I have some problems with. I mean, not problems. Uh, I personally like a defined breeding season of say 2 months, but a lot of people don't do that. They may have a 4 month breeding season. Um, 3 months is kind of average. A lot of people have a 3 month average. The more cows you have, the harder it is to have that 2 month breeding season. Okay, uh, or a 45-day breeding season and calving season. Uh, but some people calve year round, and uh, if you're starting a herd, unless you buy somebody out, or you're really picky about what cows you buy and when they're calving, or you buy open cows and right after calving, and you put the bulls in when you want them in. Uh, you know, what do you do if you have a herd of cows that calving, say, has a 5 or 6 month calving period? How do you shorten that up to 2 months? You sell off half your cow herd. Those that calve, you figure, okay, if I want to calve in March and April, so any cow that calves in May, June, or July, and August, I'm selling. Would that be practical?
Uh, I guess it could be.
It could be. It depends, doesn't it? If you have enough money, you know, to buy back to keep the size herd you want, yeah, you can sell all those cows that don't calve in that defined, in those 2 months for your goal, and take the money you get from culling those other cows out and add some to it and buy cows that will calve in that time frame. Or maybe you want to go 4 months, and then the next year you back it up to 3 months. Or maybe you want to split it. Maybe you want to say, let's do part of my calving herd in my cows calving in March and April, and these later calving cows, we'll have them calving at a different time, say September. Or maybe you could go in there and, you know, that would be another possibility. Uh, or you could come in there and say, okay, this year I'm going to go a 3 month calving season, and uh, you may want to get rid of those, get rid of the other ones. I don't know. There's several different ways to go about doing it. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of time, so you're going to have to be patient. If you don't want to be patient, then you need to be planning on shelling out some money to buy more cows, put in your program to calve when you want them to calve, or raising replacement heifers and breeding them, developing them, and getting them bred to calve when you want them to calve. But it's not a cheap and easy fix. It's going to be expensive, and it's going to be time consuming. It's going to take several years, but you can do it. And there's several different articles out there you can read to figure out which method would be best for your situation, because each one's different. Uh, Another thing we need to look at are is money, because we talked about sustainability. So if we need to keep records on you know individual animals. We need to keep records on what we're buying, feed wise, fuel wise, fence wise. We need to know what our cost of production are. What are some of the you know you can come down to put your cost of production into two categories: feed costs and non-feed costs. Right? What's going to be higher?
Feed cost.
Yeah, usually it's your feed costs. It can be up to 70% of the cost of keeping a cow. The lower we get those yearly cow costs down, feed and non-feed costs, the more we have to make money from our calves. Um, so um, if we take a look, feed costs, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? It's what we got in feed. What about our non-feed costs? What are some of those? How can we break them down further?
It would be like vaccines and
Okay, veterinarian and medical costs, vaccines, any type of medicines we buy to treat our cows with, That's a good one. What about, we talked about identification. Is that a cost?
Yes.
Yeah. Uh, so when we think of livestock supplies, we think of ID tags or fly tags or fly control. Uh, we think about, if we're tattooing our cows for identification, that tattoo ink, uh, or branding, you know, if we brand them, uh, that's an, that's going to be a cost. Um, what about breeding costs? Does it cost does it cost us money to get a cow bred?
Yes.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? We have to buy a bull, and we have to keep him up, and we have to buy bulls or males, and we have to feed them, right? Um, so we have the cost of keeping that bull once we get him bought. Um, if we artificial inseminate, we have to buy the semen. We have to buy the supplies, you know, like the drugs, the equipment. We have to heat check or run them through the chute and breed them. That's a cost. So it costs. So we can take these non-feed costs and break them down into breeding costs, veterinarian and medicine costs. So that's going to be your vaccines, your worm medicines, any type of vet care, uh, brake checking, things like that. Uh, Livestock supplies such as tags, ink, branding, uh, think those deals. What about uh, marketing? Does it cost us to market our cattle?
Yes.
Yeah, it does. Even if we just load up our cows and take them to the local market, when they're sold, they're going to take $1 a head for the beef checkoff. That's a given, unless you say don't. I don't want to do that. Sheep has a similar type program. Uh, the and then the market's going to take a commission. They're going to charge you to sell their cows because it's a business too. They got to make money. Uh, so if you do, if you put them on a BQA sale, it's going to cost you a little bit more to market them. Okay, because you know you're still paying a commission to the market or to the set, whoever's running that auction, and you're going to pay for the state graders to come out and grade them. I think you pay for that, and then you're going to pay for those special ear tags, that says, "Hey, I've met all these requirements for a BQA. They're weaned, they're vaccinated, and they've been state graded, uh, and they've been promoted. Because they promote those sales. Uh, you know, they advertise, and so that's going to be a cost. So no matter how you do it, you're going to have a marketing cost. Now, selling on these BQA sales is going to cost you a little bit more, but typically, historically, those cattle bring more. So not only do you cover those extra costs, but you usually get a little bit extra money as well. Typically, that's the case. So I'm a big proponent of getting for you guys to get for beef producers to be BQA certified and going through that process so you get more money for your cattle. Uh, what about uh, repairs and stuff to your farm vehicles?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a cost. You know, tires, oil, the farm vehicle itself, whether it's, you know, hauling to market or cut, or, you know, or maybe you get them custom hired, but it's still um, a cost. Um, what about interest? Is that a cost?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. You know, you think about it, if you're a beef producer, how many times a year do you get paid?
Once.
Once a year. All right. And if you do this full time and you get paid once a year, how are you going to operate the rest of the year? Because, uh, you know, you got all these costs. You got your household expenses too, right? What's your standard of living? You want to drive a Mercedes all the time? You want to go on big fancy vacations? You know, what is your cost of living? Does that, you know, and that's one thing I think you need to ask. If I'm going to do this full time, what's going to be my standard of living? Uh, and I think that's a reasonable question to ask. Uh, Even if, no matter what profession you want to go into, what does your standard of living want to be? Because if you want to live the lifestyle of a rich and famous person, you need to find a profession that can support that. You may have to become a movie star or something like that, depending on how high on the hog you want to live, what's your standard of living. So, you know, that's a valid question you need to ask yourself. If I'm wanting to make a living just off my farm, what's going to be my standard of living? How much money do I want to make for me and my family? Sometimes I think we forget to ask those basic questions. Um, does it sound like I'm rambling?
No.
Okay, because I hope I'm not. I mean, I'm trying to put real life stuff here, guys, that we got to think about. I think for the most of us, and myself included, our farming operations are a part-time deal. We're going to have a secondary income. Is there anything wrong with that?
No.
No, there's not a doggone thing wrong with that at all. We do it because we love it. I love working with livestock, and I always want to be that to be a part of my life. But I also realize that my little farm is not going to be able to sustain me. Um, you know, when I start thinking about my food bill, my electric bill, my health care, my health and health insurance, a vehicle, um, insurance for my vehicle, insurance for my farm, taxes. I can't afford it just what my farm would bring in. So I have another job. It's expensive to live, and I know for the traditional students like Jasmine, sometimes we don't think about all that stuff because we haven't experienced it yet. But for those of us that are older, uh, and it's a real deal for us. Because sometimes I wonder where am I going to get the money to make this bill? For years, I did not have any type of TV other than what I could get in with my little rabbit ears because I did not want that expense. I didn't have the money for it, and uh, I just, I didn't have time to watch TV anyway. Still don't have a lot of time to watch TV, but and I didn't have internet. Uh, I have internet now, but it sucks. HughesNet is a pain in the butt. It's slow. At least it is at our house, and we don't have cable because cable doesn't run where I live for us to hook onto it. We have direct TV, um, but we don't have cable. Uh, but for years I didn't even have direct TV. Uh, so uh, I can't make enough money training horses and farming to sustain me. I have to have another job. I've tried it, and I got by, but if I had to replace my truck, I couldn't do it. Uh, it was impossible for me to do. So, these are questions we have to ask ourselves. Uh, and so doing it part time, there's nothing wrong with it, you know, because we still need to do it as a business to make money, and we can do it as a business, and we can make money. We want to optimize our profits from it. And then we take a look at some other costs that we have. Sometimes you're going to have to hire somebody to help you, especially, doesn't matter if you work full time at this or part time. There's times you're going to have extra help, whether it's putting up hay or having somebody there to help you work cattle because it's just you. You need an extra somebody else. Uh, what about property? Is that a cost?
Yes.
Doggone right it is. Land's expensive. And so whether we rent our land to put cattle on or we own it, it's a cost. And if we own it, we've got taxes we have to pay on that as well. So, um, any buildings, we probably need some type of building structures to put our equipment in, or we have cows, we have a spring blizzard, we need to get them up, or put some in the barn or something. We need some buildings. May not be fancy, may not be big, but we're gonna have to have something. Uh, and we have machinery, right? And that's going to be depending on your deal, uh, the type of machinery you have. Now, do you have to have the latest and greatest? No, no, you don't. Uh, do you have to have a lot of it? No, but you're gonna have to have something. If you're feeding cows, you got hay to feed. All right. So, are you going to go round bales or square bales? I can tell you right now, it's tough to find square bales. If you had square bales, you could get them hauled. You can go buy them, put them in your barn, or cover them with a tarp, throw them in your old pickup truck or on the back of the four wheeler or your Granger, whatever you have, and go out and feed them. They take you more than one trip, depending how many cows you got. Square bales are pretty labor intensive, but you can manhandle them. What about round bales? They're a little bit more convenient, right? But you can't manhandle those. You have to. You'll have to have some type of equipment, uh, whether it's a tractor and a hay spear, or one of those forks that goes in the back of your pickup to where you can back into it. and spear it, drive out to unload it, to feed it to your cows. Or you can buy one of those little dollies, uh, looks like a trailer, and you can back up to it and get your bale put on there, uh, and take it out. You can pull that with a four wheeler. A very crude method, but it works, is a gate. You can take a chain and put around that round bale or a rope, drag that thing up on top of a gate, and hook onto it with your pickup truck, four wheeler, depending on the size of your four wheeler and depending on the number of rocks in your pasture, and depending on the if you have a lot of rocks in your pasture, the gate doesn't work real well because it acts like a sled. Uh, but you can pull that round bale with the pickup truck on the gate if push came to shove. And if you have a cow out or somewhere you can't get your truck to it, uh, you know, or you can get your truck to it, but you got to get it loaded up. How you going to do it? Several different ways you can do it, but you can if you can get a rope on that cow and get her stopped, and get a rope on her feet, and get her down and tie her feet together, and you can drag her on top of the gate and pull her on that gate as well. It works. Uh, but you just got to be careful. If you got a lot of rocks like I do where I live, they kind of get hung up on the rocks. The gate does, but it works. And it needs to be a good heavy duty gate. But anyway, you don't have to have a whole lot of equipment. You do need some type of working facility with a head catch for those cows when you treat them and you brake check them. But you got to have and to get them loaded up. That had to be fancy. You just got to have something, and that's an expense. Uh, so uh, cow costs, they you put all those costs together and you put it, you know, divide it out over your cow herd, and you know it can it your cow costs can range from $200 and up a year, depending on how much equipment, the price of your equipment, your land, your cost of the land, your feed cost. Sometimes it can get up three, four, $500. Uh, Ideally, if we can keep it in that $300 range, that's pretty good. If we can get it lower, that's great. But every year is going to be different depending on the cost of feed and the cost of fuel. Uh, I've about come to the conclusion that fuel costs drive all your other costs. Uh, but anyway, uh, but the lower we keep our cow costs, um, it's the more the better off, the better chances we have to make money. Because when we sell that calf, she's that calf's got to cover that cow cost, and then what's left is what our money, our profit's going to be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So ideally, we want to know what our costs are, and then divide it up equally over the herd. So um, we just want to take up to it. We just want to look at it that way, so we can get these cows to pay for our stuff. So, most times our feed costs are going to be about 60% of our total cost. And that's probably one place where we can make some pretty quick changes of lowering their costs with what we feed our cows. And that's where that forage management comes into play. The longer we can graze our cattle, the less we have to feed. So um, it's cheaper to graze than it is to feed harvested feed. And so I'm big on the ideal of forage management so that we can extend our grazing season later in the year and hopefully earlier in the spring. Um, so, uh, that can really, you know, we can really decrease some of our costs through that. But again, that's going to be another cost we're adding to that, but hopefully it will pay for it. It will pay for itself uh, over the long run. Um, the other thing that's going to make a big cost, you know, of of how much money we make are the number of calves that we sell. So if um, if we have a high percentage of our cows get pregnant and wean a calf for us to sell, that's good. If we have if we don't have as many cows, if we have a lot of open cows, uh, or we don't have a lot of calves to sell, that's going to mean what that means is that in a financial term, say we have 100 cows and say we have 90 calves to sell at weaning time. Can we sell those 90 calves for less money per head and make make more money or make uh, can we sell those? Say we have a goal of making a certain amount of money. Are we more liable to reach that goal by having more calves to sell and we could take a lower price and reach that goal, right? Whereas if we had less calves to sell, that would mean we have to get a really high price for our calves in order to make that money, right? So,
Right.
um, can we dictate what price we get for our calves?
Not really.
No, you can't. If I come to your place to buy your calves and you say, Dwayne, I want $1.20 per calf, and I say, that's a fair price, I'll pay it. But if you say, Dwayne, I want $1.50 per pound or 150 per hundredweight, I'll say, Jasmine, I can go down here to the local livestock market and buy them for half that, or buy them for $1.20, and you're going to keep those calves because you're not going to sell them at that price, right? So, you know, you have a little flexibility. You say, well, Dwayne, these calves are weaned, they're vaccinated, they're ready to be turned out on grass. Well, I can give you $1.25, but I can't give you $1.50. I'm gonna go shop around and buy and find something else. You're not going to you're not going to be able to do it. Sell them. So we're price takers in agriculture. You know, corn is corn. If I'm raising corn and you're raising corn, it's corn, right? And as a buyer, they're not going to tell any difference between my corn and your corn, right? We're just
Right.
going to get the same set price. So, in order for me to make money, I'm going to have to raise that corn cheaper than you can. My part of the country, I'm not going to do it. you're going to raise it cheaper than me. So by having more calves to sell, we can, you know, we're going to have a little flexibility on that price from the standpoint of covering our costs. Our break even price, say our break even, you know, if our cow cost is $300, okay, say we've, and let me pull out my calculator. Our cow cost is $300 a cow, and we've got a 600-pound calf. Uh, we're going to have to make, you know, to cover our costs, we're going to have to sell that 600-pound calf. We got to get at least $300 for it, right? That shouldn't be hard to do. That's 50 cents a pound. But say we have, how I'm trying to figure out how to say this to make it make sense. Um, all right. Let me read it. Let me try to read it out here. When we take our annual cow costs and we divide it to our cows, um, but and but we don't have, you know, what we want. You know, we want a break even price. What price do we have to have for our cows, for our calves, for us to break even on our cow cost? And that's feed. That's feed non. That's feed cost and non-feed cost. We've got to have a certain price in order to break even, right? Now, the lower we get that break even price, the more money we're going to make. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So we go into, say, we wean our calves, we preg check, and we buy back or we hold back, whatever it is. So we go into calving season with 100 bred cows. If we have 100 calves to sell, our break even price for our calves, say our cow costs us $300 a year, our break even price for those 100 calves is going to be $300, right? In
Right.
reality, we're not going to have 100 cows to sell or 100 calves to wean off. We're going to lose some during calving, and we may lose some during the growing season from calving to weaning. We may lose one or two. So if we gain or if we lose 10 calves, then we have 90 calves to sell, and to cover that cost. So we have, all right, so we have 100 calves to sell, 100% calf crop, to cover our cost of $300 a cow. Our break even price on those calves is $300 a calf, right?
Right.
All right. And we take 300 times 100, we come up with $30,000. So that's our that's what we got to bring from our calves to break even, right? So we have 90 calves to sell. $30,000 90, all of a sudden, if we have a 90% calf crop to sell at weaning time, our break even costs have gone up to $333 a calf instead of 300. Make sense?
Yes.
If we have if our cost again is $30,000, $300 a cow, 100 cows, and we only wean 85 calves to sell, now our break even cost is $352. And these are arbitrary figures. Okay. Does that make sense? So the less calves that we have to sell from our herd of cows, the higher, the more money we have to have per calf to break even. So the thing, to get that low break even cost is we have to be low cost producers and we have to have good reproduction. Because the less reproduction we have, the more open cows that we have, the more calves that we lose, the higher that break even price. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
So that's why I stress so much on nutrition and reproduction. They go hand in hand. It's critical for you uh, because that's going to dictate, you know, a lot on their reproductive efficiencies at nutrition. And you have to understand them both because they go hand in hand. All right. Did I bore you today?
Not really.
We're talking business, more or less. And I try to bring in some real world stuff, things to think about, things to ask yourself. But anyway, we're out of time, so I will let you go. I hope that helps, and I hope that helps you, Jasmine, and I hope that helps everybody else on their project. Let's talk. Let's think about some, numbers and economics. And now you understand why I put that economic deal in there, right?
Yes.
If it works out and you make money, great. If you end up losing money on this written project, that's great too. I'm not going to dock your grade for that. It's the process of you going through this and thinking about it, and learning. Okay. But I want you to whether or not you make or not make money is not going to, it's not going to affect your grade. Your grade is going to be based on your your nutritional deal, your reproduction, your health, and this economics. That you went through this process. All right. All right. You have a good day, Jasmine.
You
I'll
too.
talk to you.